Be part of the peace movement. Share this episode using hashtag The Great Disarmament and download the free peace resource guide at aviskalfsbeck.com/peace guide. The Great Disarmament, The Great Disfarmament, Part 9, Powder and Principles. Hi, I'm Avis Kalfsbeck, author, podcast host, and peace storyteller. This is The Great Disarmament, The Great Disfarmament, a special series from Pieces Here, tracing the parallel histories of how we learn to kill and how we might stop. If you're just joining us, welcome. Each episode maps a moment in the twin stories of war and agriculture. By the 1600s, the shape of war has changed. Gunpowder has reshaped battlefields, expanding the reach and efficiency of violence. Empires are rising on every continent, many justified by divine right, many financed by stolen land and labor. This period is often called the Age of Empires, but it is also the age of extraction from soil, from people, from meaning. And yet, within this era of global conquest, something else begins to stir, a resistance not built on weapons, but on principles. Setting the stage, the invention of gunpowder allowed killing at a distance. It removed the need for physical strength or personal skill. No longer did soldiers have to meet their enemy face to face. With gunpowder came new armies, organized, professional, loyal to empires rather than communities. Cannons flattened cities, muskets replaced bows, naval fleets turned oceans into highways of conquest. But amid the smoke of mechanized war, something quieter took root. Philosophers, spiritual leaders, and dissidents began to raise a different question. Must violence define us? The dominant technologies of the period reflect a fully militarized world. Muskets, cannons, and early rifles were now widespread across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Gunpowder-based naval fleets gave empires dominance over oceans. Colonial violence became normalized, often justified by racial hierarchy, religious destiny, or economic necessity. War became not only frequent but profitable. It was a method of governance, expansion, and control. But even as military power surged, so did a quiet refusal. Several traditions of resistance emerged, some spiritual, some philosophical, some political. Among the earliest were the Quakers, or Religious Society of Friends. In the 1600s, they publicly rejected war, refused military service, and grounded their faith in peace. Their teachings would influence generations of nonviolent movements. Meanwhile, Enlightenment philosophers began to ask new questions. Immanuel Kant imagined the idea of perpetual peace, not as an ideal, but as a possible human arrangement. Others debated the ethics of empire, the dignity of the individual, and the limits of authority. In Russia, the seeds of Leo Tolstoy's pacifism were sown through his eventual writings and personal refusal of military service, which would influence Gandhi and others. In the Americas, indigenous resistance took many forms, not only armed conflict, but spiritual endurance, oral histories, and ceremonial defiance. Their struggle was not simply for territory, but for an entire way of seeing the world. At the same time, abolitionist thinkers began to think slavery, war, and empire as parts of a single system. The argument for peace became inseparable from the argument for justice. One of the clearest articulations of peace in this era came from William Penn, the Quaker founder of Pennsylvania. In 1693, he wrote, "Force may subdue, but love gains, and he who forgives first wins the laurel." Penn envisioned a society built on fairness, not force. He negotiated with indigenous nations rather than conquering them, and refused to establish a militia. His vision was imperfect and shaped by his time, but it pointed in a different direction. He believed peace could be foundational, not a reward after war, but a principle upon which a society could be built. What it means for us. To choose peace in this period was not symbolic. It was dangerous. It could cost your reputation, your land, or even your life. Yet the people who made this choice created a lineage. Their refusal challenged the idea that war is inevitable. They showed that peace is not the absence of conflict, but a form of courage, that it takes more conviction to disobey than to follow a violent order, and that sometimes the boldest act is to put down the gun. From the page to the soil. To understand the vision of peace emerging in this time, we turn to two texts. The first is Utopia, written by Thomas More in 1516, just before the rise of gunpowder empires. More describes a fictional society that avoids war whenever possible and treats it as a last resort, refusing conquest, honoring diplomacy, and educating citizens towards justice. The second is the Quaker Peace Testimony of 1660. It reads in part, "We utterly deny all outward wars and strife and fightings with outward weapons for any end or under any pretense whatsoever." This declaration was not a metaphor. It was a refusal to participate in state violence, and it helped form a moral tradition that influenced abolition, civil rights, and disarmament movements for centuries to come. Together, these texts mark a shift from power to principle, from dominance to dialogue. They remind us that disarmament doesn't begin with treaties or tools. It begins with a refusal, spoken clearly, lived fully, and passed down. In the next episode, we enter Gas and Conscience, a look at World War I, chemical warfare, and the first global cries against destruction on an industrial scale. I'll see you there. That wraps up this episode of Peace is Here. Will you please take a moment to subscribe and share it with a friend? Subscribing helps others discover peaceful, independent storytelling, and it means a lot to me. I'm Avis Kaufsbeck, author of the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet series, eco-adventure novellas for readers who care about environmental justice, joy, and saving the world one story at a time. You can learn more at aviskaufsbeck.com. Book 6, Mono Mutante, is now available at all major online retailers, or if you'd like to support my book directly, you can get the ebook at aviskaufsbeck.com/mono-mutante. It's a wild satirical ride through food, farming, and the messiness of recovery. When you subscribe to my list, you'll also be the first to hear about my next book, Bulletproof, which asks, what in the world are we going to do about guns? A link to subscribe is in the show notes. From October 18th to November 8th, 2025, I'm running a live Kickstarter campaign. I'd be so grateful if you'd visit aviskaufsbeck.com/Kickstarter to get notified. I'm creating a companion field journal for Book 1, One More Year, called Peace Stuff Primer, along with a stage play version of the book. I can't wait to share it with you. This episode was human narrated by me with the help of AI, which has promised to let me know if it ever makes something up. So far, no confessions, but if you think I've missed something or if you just want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Podcast music is by Javier Peque Rodriguez. You'll find links to his music on Spotify and Bandcamp in the show notes. I'm Avis Kaufsbeck. Thank you again. Until next time, listen for the peace.